The Enigma of the Locked Room. Chapter 1. The Silent Night. The small town of Aldridge had always been a quiet place, a haven of tranquility where life followed a gentle, constant rhythm. Its narrow streets meandered between old stone houses and slate roofs, giving the town a picturesque and almost timeless charm. It was as if time itself had decided to take a pause there, allowing the inhabitants to live in a kind of bubble of serenity. But that night, something was clearly different. A thick, opaque fog spread through the streets, covering the houses and faintly illuminating the old street lamps that cast a weak, flickering light. The fog seemed to have a life of its own, enveloping the town in a shroud of mystery and unease. It was one of those nights when the silence seemed heavier, almost suffocating, as if the town was holding its breath, waiting for something that couldn't be identified but was palpable in the air. Elizabeth Hartman, a 28-year-old woman, lived in Aldridge and worked as a teacher at the town's only school. She lived alone in an old house she had inherited from her grandparents, situated at the end of a dead-end street. The house, with its thick stone walls and small windows that seemed like half-closed eyes, always appeared a bit dark and gloomy, even during the day, as if the sunlight had difficulty penetrating its interior. That night, Elizabeth was particularly uneasy. A feeling of discomfort and anticipation seemed to hang in the air, as if something was about to happen, something invisible but tangible. Around 11 o'clock at night, as the bells of Aldridge's church began to toll in the distance, marking the end of a peaceful day, Elizabeth was about to go to bed. She had already darkened the windows and prepared for rest when she heard an unexpected sound coming from the living room. It was a muffled noise, a dull and unexpected sound, as if something had fallen to the ground. Her heart immediately raced, and with a mix of fear and curiosity, she descended the stairs cautiously. Each step creaked under her feet, protesting the intrusion, as if the house itself was resisting her presence. When she reached the living room, everything seemed normal, almost disturbingly so. The light from the floor lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the room appeared undisturbed. However, something was out of place. The window, which she always kept firmly closed to prevent the cold air from entering, was now slightly open. A cold, biting breeze swept into the room, making the curtains sway unsettlingly, as if they were trying to convey something she couldn't understand. Elizabeth quickly closed the window, trying to dispel the discomfort that enveloped her. As she turned to go back to her room, something caught her attention. On the floor, near the fireplace, was an object she didn't immediately recognize. It was a small brown envelope, sealed with red wax. The seal looked old and worn by time, with an emblem that wasn't part of any familiar symbol she knew. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Envelope. With trembling hands and a racing heart, Elizabeth picked up the envelope. The paper was thick and rough to the touch, with a texture indicating it had been handmade with meticulous care. The lack of a sender and the antique appearance only heightened the mystery surrounding the envelope. Her curiosity mixed with a twinge of fear, and with a hesitant gesture, she broke the wax seal and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The letter was written in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. The curved, perfect letters seemed to have been drawn with a quill and ink, and the message they contained sent a shiver down Elizabeth's spine. The truth is hidden where the wind doesn't blow, where the light doesn't enter. Trust no one. The key is in the room that has never been opened. Elizabeth's heart raced faster. The words of the letter seemed to carry a dark and enigmatic weight. What did it mean? And who had left the envelope in her house? Her hands were sweaty as she reread the message, trying to decipher its meaning. Then, a sudden memory surfaced in her mind. The room upstairs, a space she never used. It was the only room in the house that had remained locked since she moved in. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, assuming it was just a storage room forgotten by the previous owners. Now, however, the idea of that locked room seemed alarmingly relevant. The mention of a room that had never been opened resonated in her mind, and a sense of urgency drove her to discover what was hidden there. Chapter 3. The Never-Opened Room. Determined to find out what was happening, Elizabeth grabbed the old bunch of keys from a drawer in the kitchen. The key was heavy and seemed to belong to a much earlier time. She climbed the stairs again, each step a little more determined, with her heart pounding in rhythm with each step. Upon reaching the door of the locked room, she felt a strange tension in the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath in anticipation. With the key in hand, she inserted it into the lock. As she turned the key, she felt an unexpected resistance, as if the door was reluctant to open. But, with a slight effort and a loud, painful creak, the lock gave way and the door opened, revealing a room that seemed to have been abandoned for decades. The smell of mold and dust filled her nostrils, and Elizabeth turned on the light of the small ceiling chandelier. The illumination revealed a room filled with old objects covered by dusty white sheets. Heavy furniture, such as an old rocking chair and a dark desk, occupied the space, and a tall mirror, covered in dust and cobwebs, reflected the weak light. However, what caught her attention the most was what was on the bed. An old leather trunk, worn by time and covered in dust. Elizabeth approached slowly, with a mix of hesitation and determination. When she opened the trunk, she found a series of old documents, black and white photographs, and a small wooden box, locked with a rusty padlock. Inside the trunk, there was also another envelope, very similar to the one she had found in the living room. With trembling fingers and a growing sense of unease, she opened the second envelope. This time, the message was even more disturbing and enigmatic. She knows. Time is running out. Find the truth before they find you. Chapter 4. Buried Secrets. Elizabeth spent the following days immersed in investigating the documents she had found. They were property records, letters exchanged between her grandparents, and a mysterious figure referred to only as the messenger. The photographs showed people she had never seen before, but they all seemed somehow connected to her family. Each document seemed to raise more questions than answers, and a feeling of helplessness and confusion enveloped her as she tried to understand the meaning of it all. The small locked box remained a mystery. Elizabeth tried several times to force the padlock, but it seemed to be more resistant than she had imagined. Frustration began to consume her thoughts, and she knew the key must be somewhere. The words of the letter wouldn't leave her mind. Where the wind doesn't blow, where the light doesn't enter. One night, while examining the photographs again, Elizabeth noticed a detail she had previously missed. One of the images showed a group of people standing around a large tree. Beneath the tree, something seemed to be buried. On the back of the photo, in faded letters, was written, "The family secret rests here." With the image in hand and a renewed determination, Elizabeth decided to head to the garden. The night was cold and the wind howled through the trees, creating an almost ghostly atmosphere. At the back of the yard, she found the old tree from the photograph. With a shovel in hand, she began to dig vigorously, driven by a mix of fear and hope. Chapter 5. The Dark Truth. After hours of digging, Elizabeth finally hit something solid. It was a small metal box, rusty and covered in dirt. With considerable effort, she managed to open it, revealing the key she had been searching for, now appearing as an otherworldly artifact amidst the chaos. Back in the room, she used the key to unlock the small wooden box from the trunk. What she found inside was shocking and terrifying. A series of letters revealing her family's involvement in an old crime, a murder long covered up. The letters described the details of a macabre case where her grandfather had been an accomplice in a mysterious homicide. The victim, a young woman, was never found. The letters indicated that the woman's remains were hidden in a place where the light doesn't enter, the basement of her own house. The revelation left Elizabeth stunned and terrified. The basement, an area of the house she had never fully explored, now became the focus of her search. The discovery of such a dark secret made her feel betrayed and threatened by her own family history. Chapter 6. The Outcome. With the discovery, Elizabeth finally understood the gravity of the situation. Her family harbored a dark secret, and now she was in danger. But before she could act or make any decisions, she heard a noise behind her. When she turned around, she saw a hooded figure at the door of the room. The figure looked like a shadow, and its eyes glowed with a cold, threatening intensity. "You shouldn't have discovered this," said a cold, menacing voice before everything went dark. The sound of a muffled blow and the flash of a blade were the last details Elizabeth noticed before losing consciousness. Days later, The town of Aldridge was shaken by the news of Elizabeth Hartman's disappearance. Her house was empty, with no signs of struggle or resistance. The police found the leather trunk and the documents, but the wooden box and the key were missing. The town was in shock, and the mystery surrounding Elizabeth's disappearance remained unsolved. Chapter 7. The Disappearance. As the town of Aldridge recovered from the shock of Elizabeth's disappearance, the mystery pervaded every corner of the small community. Residents gathered in groups, speculating about what might have happened to the young teacher. The sense of desolation was palpable, and the presence of the fog that still lingered in the streets seemed to reflect the state of confusion and fear that engulfed everyone. Investigators, puzzled and with no concrete leads, began to examine Elizabeth's house with meticulous attention. They discovered the leather trunk and the documents, but the wooden box and the key had vanished without a trace. The investigation was complicated by the lack of physical evidence and the absence of any eyewitnesses. The house appeared to have been abandoned suddenly, with no signs of struggle or resistance. Meanwhile, the town of Aldridge couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was hidden in the shadows. The mystery surrounding Elizabeth's disappearance continued to intrigue and terrify the residents. Elizabeth's house was placed under surveillance, but no suspicious activity was detected. Chapter 8. The Messenger. Among the residents of Aldridge, a man known only as the Messenger began to attract attention. No one knew much about him, except that he was a stranger who had arrived in town a few months earlier. The Messenger seemed to have a particular interest in Elizabeth's house and the ongoing investigation. His mysterious presence and evasive actions raised suspicions. One night, one of the residents saw the Messenger approaching Elizabeth's house with a dark expression and a wrapped package in his hands. The package seemed to contain something small and heavy. Intrigued, the resident decided to follow discreetly, but the Messenger disappeared into the fog before he could find out more. Chapter 9. The Discovery. As the town delved into speculation about the Messenger, a new lead emerged. One of the documents found in the leather trunk, previously ignored, contained a reference to a property located near Aldridge, called the House of Shadows. The document indicated that this property had belonged to an ancestor of Elizabeth's, and that there was a connection between the House of Shadows and the mystery of the locked room. Elizabeth had mentioned the House of Shadows in one of the letters found, but no one had paid attention to this reference. Now, with the town on high alert, the lead investigator decided to follow this clue. The House of Shadows was located in a secluded area, surrounded by dense and almost impenetrable vegetation. Upon arriving at the property, the investigator found the house in an even more advanced state of abandonment than Elizabeth's house. The structure was covered in moss and ivy, with broken windows and creaking doors. Inside, the investigator found evidence that the house had been used as a hideout. There were traces of old documents and personal items similar to those found in Elizabeth's house. Chapter 10. Revelations. While exploring the House of Shadows, the investigator discovered a secret compartment in the basement. Inside the compartment were more documents, including detailed records about a secret cult that had operated in the region in the early 20th century. The records described dark rituals and ceremonies, and mentioned a series of unresolved murders and disappearances, all somehow connected to Elizabeth's family. The documents revealed that the wooden box found in Elizabeth's house was part of a set of artifacts used by the cult. The key found with Elizabeth was the key to a deeper and darker secret. The truth about the unsolved murder of a young woman and Elizabeth's grandfather's involvement with the cult were central pieces of a much larger mystery. The investigator began piecing together the puzzle and discovered that the cult had been led by a group of influential people in the town, including Elizabeth's grandparents. The House of Shadows had been the site of many of the cult's macabre rituals, and the truth about the events that unfolded there was finally beginning to emerge. Chapter 11. The Return. With the new discoveries in hand, the investigator returned to Elizabeth's house and began to re-examine the basement with greater attention. There, he found a secret panel hidden behind a false wall. The panel revealed an underground compartment containing more documents and a series of macabre objects, including old photographs and personal notes from cult members. The documents contained a detailed description of the cult's activities, including the planning and execution of the murder. They also mentioned that the secret of the entire cult was buried under the house, specifically in the basement, where the body of the young woman had been hidden. Chapter 12. The Confrontation. As the investigator continued to make unsettling discoveries, the town of Aldridge remained haunted by the lack of answers regarding Elizabeth's disappearance. With the investigation taking new turns, the outsider became increasingly active and restless. His connection to the cult and the events in Aldridge was becoming clearer. In a final confrontation, the investigator managed to locate the outsider and confront him about his intentions. The outsider, with a desperate and grim look, revealed that he was one of the last surviving members of the cult, trying to cover up the traces of a terrifying past. The secret that Elizabeth had uncovered was about to be exposed, and he was desperate to protect the dark legacy of his predecessors. Chapter 13. The Final Revelation. After the confrontation, the investigator revealed the truth about the cult and Elizabeth's family's involvement to the public. The town was shocked to discover the extent of the crimes committed and the role that the House of Shadows had played in the entire plot. Elizabeth was found alive, though gravely injured and traumatized, in an isolated location outside the town. She had been held captive by the outsider, but managed to escape when the cult began to crumble. The basement of the house was finally explored, and the remains of the young woman were found, providing some closure to the tragic story. The town of Aldridge, after a period of mourning and rebuilding, began to recover from the revelation of the dark secrets that had remained hidden for so long. Elizabeth, now free, decided to leave the town and start a new life away from the shadows of the past. With the mystery resolved and the secrets exposed, Aldridge tried to return to its peaceful routine, but the memory of the disturbing events continued to haunt the town. The House of Shadows was left in ruins, a silent reminder of the horrors that had occurred there. Elizabeth, now at peace, found a new path away from the shadows that once darkened her life. The small town, though marked by trauma, learned to value the truth and seek justice, ensuring that stories of mystery and suspense did not remain unresolved. Chapter 14. A New Life. After the tumultuous events, Elizabeth decided to leave Aldridge and move to a larger city where she could start anew, far from the weight of the past. She found a new apartment in a coastal city, far from the mists and mysteries that had defined her previous life. Elizabeth spent the following months rebuilding her life and mental health. She sought therapy to deal with the trauma and found solace in activities that had once seemed insignificant. Her new home was a haven of tranquility, with a sea view that provided a welcome contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of Aldridge. Over time, Elizabeth began teaching at a new school, where she was known for her dedication and compassion. Although the past still weighed on her, she dedicated herself to helping her students find joy and hope in learning. Chapter 15. The Legacy. As Elizabeth tried to rebuild her life, the events in Aldridge continued to impact the town. The revelation about the cult and the crimes committed by the former residents left an indelible mark on the community. The House of Shadows was finally demolished, and a memorial was built on the site for the victims and those who had suffered from the cult's dark secrets. The investigator who had uncovered the mystery was praised for his work and continued to investigate complex cases in other parts of the country. His role in solving Elizabeth's case brought him recognition and respect, but also left him with a deep sense of responsibility for all the lives affected. Chapter 16. The Return of the Fog. Years had passed since the resolution of the case, and Elizabeth's life had moved on. She had managed to leave the shadows of the past behind, but fate seemed to have other plans. One night, while watching the sea from her apartment's balcony, she noticed a familiar fog starting to form. It was the same fog that covered the streets of Aldridge on the night everything began. The feeling of discomfort and unease washed over Elizabeth. The fog seemed to move with an intention of its own, and the atmosphere around her felt charged with a sinister portent. Elizabeth tried to push away the unsettling thoughts and focused on her daily life, but couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was about to happen. Chapter 17. The Reunion. On a rainy afternoon, Elizabeth received a letter with no return address, similar to those she had found before. The envelope was sealed with red wax and had a familiar emblem. With trembling hands, she broke the seal and pulled out the letter. The message was brief and disturbing. Don't forget, the truth never stays buried. Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine as she read the words. The sense that the past was reaching out to her once again was inescapable. She remembered everything she had been through and realized that perhaps the enigma was never fully resolved. Chapter 18. The Return to the Past. Determined to uncover the truth, Elizabeth returned to Aldridge, her heart heavy with apprehension. As she approached the old house, now just a memory among the ruins, she noticed a figure standing among the debris. It was the envoy, seemingly waiting for her. "What are you doing here?" Elizabeth asked, trying to stay calm. The envoy, now disfigured and aged by time, looked at her with a sad expression. "The truth is not something that can be buried forever," he said. "There's something you still haven't discovered, something that was never revealed." Elizabeth felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew she had to face this final challenge to finally find peace. Chapter 19. The Last Piece of the Puzzle. The envoy led Elizabeth to a forgotten area at the back of the property. There, he revealed a hidden passage, a tunnel leading to an underground space that had never been explored. With flashlights in hand, they followed the tunnel, which seemed to stretch on endlessly. The tunnel led to a secret chamber, where they found a series of additional objects and documents, including a diary that had belonged to the cult leader. The diary detailed not only the rituals, but also the attempt to conceal the truth about the murder of a young woman. There was a list of names, including Elizabeth's, indicating that she was a crucial part of a larger plan involving the manipulation and control of the cult members. Chapter 20. The Final Revelation. Chapter 21. Redemption. With the truth finally exposed, Elizabeth was able to find the peace she had been seeking for so long. The city of Aldridge, though scarred by the past, began to heal. Elizabeth's and the investigators' work brought justice to the victims and allowed the community to move forward. Elizabeth decided to use her experience to help others who had undergone similar traumas. She began working with organizations dedicated to supporting victims and preventing crime, sharing her story to help others find strength and hope. Epilogue. Time passed, and Elizabeth's life continued to unfold with new challenges and opportunities. She found a new purpose in her mission to bring the truth to light and help those in need. The fog that had once obscured her life was replaced by the clarity and light of truth. The city of Aldridge, now a symbol of resilience and overcoming adversity, moved forward, learning to value truth and the importance of justice. The legacy of past events served as a reminder that, even in the darkest shadows, the light of truth can eventually shine through, offering a chance for redemption and hope for all.